let's just kind of do a recap and have a little visual here. What is a div? I want you guys to think of it as a divider or a container holding stuff, grouping related items together. So some example of divs could be the header, which is the top part of your web page, not to be confused with the head tags, which is the info that search bars or search engines see. We could have body content, we could have the footer or the navigation. So here's kind of an example of different divs. Everything that goes up here on your web page is part of the header. Everything that lives over here is part of your navigation. Inside this body or content, there are separate little clear containers, clear bins. This one's called article, article, article. And then we have something at the bottom called a footer. Here's some other examples. You could have a div called the header. You could have a div called top navigation because you want it to live here instead of on the left-hand side. You could have a column 1 div, a column 2 div, a content div, and a footer div. So if you wanted specific information in column 1, you would put it inside of that div called column 1. Okay, how we name them. I was mentioning like you get out the little label maker and you start calling them things like toys, Legos, trucks, header, footer, nav. How we name a div, because a div is just a generic thing, is with an ID. IDs always need to be in lowercase, as does the initials ID, and you give it a name inside of quotation marks. So instead of just being a generic div or a generic clear plastic bin, we get out the label maker and we call it header. Everything inside here goes in the header, which is that top chunk at the top of our page. So it says div ID equals, and then in quotes header. That's the name of the tag on the outside of the div. Or ID equals site branding. Bubbleundr.com is the site branding in our example. Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay, don't confuse ID attributes with other things. This is where all these words start to get a little confusing. So a div with an ID word header has nothing to do with the head section in your code or with headings 1, 2, or 3. This could just as easily been named top stuff or top of page. The little label maker that we put on it, instead of saying header, could have said top of page all run together. Things at the top all run together. Whatever name you give it, it has to be unique and the only one for that page, but it's whatever you want to put on your little label maker to label it. No sharing. Good that we're talking about toys. IDs are unique. Oh, there's going to only be one on a page, and you can't share the names. Okay, nesting. I talked about having a big plastic bin that's labeled toys, and then inside it you have a smaller plastic box of Legos, and you have a smaller plastic box of your Barbie dolls. That's nesting. That's putting something inside of something. So divs can contain a lot of different things. They can contain paragraphs or even other divs, like the other little clear plastic boxes inside. So at the top, when we open them, we say div equals toys. And at the bottom, we would do a backslash and div, right? That's our big box. And then inside it, we could have div equals Legos, ID equals Legos. And then to close that out, we just need a backslash div, right? Because we don't have to put all the extra information. We just close it with div. Now if you look at the end of your page, you have close div, and it starts to get confusing. Like, what the hell am I closing? Which box did I just close up? So we can use something called commenting to help us know what we're closing out. So I mentioned that at the top of our code page, we have exclamation point doc type HTML. Anytime you do something with an exclamation point, that's a human comment. It doesn't get read by code, it doesn't get put into action, it's just a reminder to a human to read whatever's there. So it's optional to use these, but at the end of all your divs, when you have a bunch of nested divs inside and you're closing them all at the end, it's hard to remember which div goes with what. By clicking on the bottom one, it will light up the associated top one, and you close them in the opposite order. I know it's a little confusing, but I open the box of toys, I open the box of Legos, I open the Barbie dolls, I first close the Barbie dolls, then I close the Legos, then I close the entire box. You close them in the opposite order that you open them. So this is what your ending could look like. End of the Legos div, end of the Barbie dolls div, end of the toys div. So using comments with the exclamation point, you could say, this is the end of Barbie dolls. This is the end of the Legos. This is the end of the entire toys div. You can write whatever you want here to help yourself. That kind of makes sense? Okay. So why do we use comments at the end and not the start? Easy. The start already has the name of what's in them. The starting div is just this word div, but we put the additional information of what it is, ID header. But when we close it, it's just a simple div. So that's why at the start, it's not necessary, but at the end, we might want to say this. So if this was the way it was, this would be the way the divs would close in opposite order. We did header first, then site branding. So we first close site branding, and then close the header. All right, we're going to work through what I call exercise 2 on page 10. So let's go back to Notepad. So the page in your handout that we're looking at, today we started 2 pages prior at the bottom where it says adding structure, and then we worked through that paragraph, and then we worked through the whole next page. We flip it over, and we're at the top of page 10, and we see the little picture of the bubble under, what it should look like. And what we need to think is the things that are visible are in the body tag. So what part is considered to be part of our header? What shows up at the top of our page? Let me find the page. Here it is. These 2 things are what we consider to be part of our header. There's the actual name of it and the tagline. These are the things that we want to go or be considered in a div of the header. So if we go back to our code and we put a line here and go above where we have that first H1 bubble under, this is where we want to put our first div container. So we type in div, and then we have to name it, give it an ID right away. So we're getting out our label maker. ID equals, and we're going to call this header. Again, this could be top stuff, top of page, masthead. It doesn't matter what word you use here, but when you go to style it, you have to use the same word and the same spelling. So the div is the header, and this is going to end after these 2 things, after the heading 1 and the paragraph. So before the H2, this is where the div ends. So \div ends. So everything inside here is part of my header. I'm just tabbing in to make it look easy and recognizable. And it's pretty easy because we have nothing nested in here, but if we wanted to write a comment to remind us what this closing div is about, we can do that. We use that opening caret, exclamation point, and then we can write whatever we want here. So I did dash, end of the header div, end caret. This is just a comment. The code will not read this. The minute it sees this exclamation point, it knows it's not to be put on the screen. It's just for humans to read. So this is our first container, our clear box, and we put a label on it called it header. All right. All right, now we're going to do some nesting. So there's 2 elements inside of our header. If we go and look at it, these 2 things, the bubble under and then their tagline. And we're actually going to give those divs themselves. This first thing we're going to call site branding. So in other words, how do we brand our site? It's either going to be a logo or a name or whatever. And then what is our tagline? The Diving Club for the UK. So those are the 2 things that we're going to put in nested divs. So if you go to the next page in our handout, it starts at the top with nesting explained, and it talks about putting a div inside of a div, which we're going to do. We're going to jump to the bottom of the page and actually work with this one. So back to our div with the header. after that initial line, div ID header, I'm going to put my cursor and then go down a line. And I'm going to start opening my first nested div, or my first Rubbermaid box inside of here. So I'm going to put a new div in here. And this one I'm going to call, or give an ID equals, site branding, in quotes. End quote, closing caret. And the only thing that's part of the site branding is the header h1 bubbleUnder.com. So as soon as that's done and the heading 1 closed, I'm going to close out that div. Backslash. So here's my first nested clear plastic box inside of the big plastic box called header. This one is called site branding. Later, when I tell it to be styled and have some pretty looks to it and not look so darn ugly, I'm going to say anything with an ID of site branding should be 72-point hot pink times New Roman italics. And whatever is in the ID of site branding will follow those rules. Okay? So that's our first nested div, and then we're going to do another one wrapping the tagline of the Diving Club for the Southwest. So we're going to make a new div, and this one, we're going to give it an ID equals, and then in quotation marks, tagline, end quote, end caret, and the tagline is just this paragraph of the Diving Club for the Southwest, let's make a splash, end paragraph, and then close that div, backslash div. So here is the second one nested inside. So if we didn't have this comment down here that we already did saying it's the end of the header div, it might be a little confusing because see how we're seeing 2 closing divs right in a row? But the beautiful thing is, if you type your code correctly, anytime you click in a tag, it's going to highlight the opening and closing tags of that pair. So here's our whole thing called a header. This is our big, clear Rubbermaid box called header. Inside of it, we have 2 smaller ones. One is called site branding, and the words bubbleUnder.com live in it. The other clear thing is called tagline, and the paragraph, the Diving Club for the Southwest, is inside of that box, that div. Make sure when you click here that you are seeing your beginning and ending things actually show up. All right. So that took care of those top 2 words. Let's save it, and let's look, and we're not going to see anything change. These 2 words, there's no styles applied to them yet. They're just sitting in plastic boxes or divs. Nothing changed visually, and that's good. If you have your code right, nothing's going to change. Everybody doing okay? Okay. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to just zoom out of this page so you can see. So here's our body. This is all the visible stuff. We have our header, and then we have all this other stuff. So after we closed out our header, now we have just a bunch of stuff, a heading 2 and a 3 and a 3. This is all of our body content. This is stuff on the rest of the page. We want to put that inside a div so that later we can stylize that with some rules too. So put your cursor after you closed out the entire header div with that comment line, and before the H2 that says welcome to our super duper scuba site, and we're going to make another plastic box, another div. So div, this one we're going to get out our label maker and we're going to give it a name of ID equals, quotation marks, body content, end quote, end closing caret. And then this bad boy is going to close out all the way down after the contact us information, but before the whole body ends. That's the visible stuff on our page. So way down here, we're going to close out that div. And if I make this page smaller, You can see my lit up purples. This is the big clear bin that contains everything that we consider to be the body content, all the words and pictures on our page. It's a couple of headers and a couple of paragraphs. So this div contains all of this. Yes?
Where did you put that closing div?
Way down at the very bottom. Do you see it down here, right before the closing body tag?
Oh, okay.
So everything else on this page, if I pop over here, so from here to here, this is all the stuff that we're moving into this next div called body content, or content. Whatever you name it is up to you, but it has to keep that name every time you use it. So these first two things were included in a div called the header with two sub boxes, if you will. And the last part of it, all of the rest of this that I've highlighted, is now in this second big div called body content. And it closes way down here after the paragraph about the email and before the body itself ends, the stuff that's visible on the screen. If we want to give ourselves a human content comment to remind us what this div is closing, we can and should do that right now. So caret, exclamation point, and then you can write your comment here. I'll say this is the end of the body content div. End caret. So this part right here is just a human comment explaining to me what this div is closing out in case I get confused or I don't want to scroll up 15 lines. Push that up on the screen. It's right here. So whatever you put here is an explanation to yourself or your partners or anybody else working on this web page of what happened. Human comment explaining the end of this div. Okay, let's do at this point a file save as. We're going to give this a slightly different name in case we screw up and we can always go back. We're going to call this one index underscore with underscore divs. So this is our index page with all these divs added, just so we know which file we're opening. It's a descriptive file name, .html. So index with divs is the name of this file now. All right. We have right here our first page of a website. It's not pretty. This is what it looks like. Not exciting at all. We have it marked up for later use with styles where we can make it look better. So we have a few of these in divs, but basically this is what it looks like. What if we want to make more than one page and have some navigation, how we can get from one page to another? The nice thing is that once you make your original page, the rest of them tend to go a lot faster because a lot of your code is already done. You think of a website, and typically the header always looks the same on every page. Maybe photos change out, but like the logo and the information is the same at the top. Where the navigation is, if it's on the left or the top, always stays. Where the footer is, all that stays the same. The stuff that changes from page to page on a website is what's in the middle. So we can reuse this code to make subsequent pages, which is super helpful. All right. Right now, we're going to do a little something. I'm going to have you guys go to any web page, any website that you like, and I'm going to have you print out the index, the start page. So go to the home page and say print, but if it's one of those that scrolls down for 17 pages, you don't need to print all 17. If it spans 2 pages to get everything from the header to the footer and it needs to print on 2 pages, great, let it print on 2 pages. Then we're going to come back and I'm going to go get, I guess, my beloved colored pencils and markers, and I'm going to have you try to see how is this divided up. So if we pulled up a web page like, not sure what the school one really looks like. Okay, so this one would probably take 2 or 3 pages to print on. But if we had to, we could guess that this is for sure the header, maybe this photo too. Like, what's it like on other pages? Let's go into another page. Okay, this part stayed the same. This is the header, just for you. Visit campus. You notice how this part down here is what's changing. So back to our home page. This part right here is probably the header, and inside of it they have the logo and they have the navigation inside of it. So that's nested inside. This is kind of a confusing one. Then they have probably a div that they call slideshow, and they put different pictures in it. And on any page that they want the slideshow to pull up, they put that same div in and load it up with slides. Then all of this is the stuff that's considered body content. This is what page changes from page to page. And then at the bottom we have the footer. This is a div and there's stuff inside it. So I'm going to have you go to a web page that you like. Wish I could think of something quickly. Oh my gosh. Anybody know of a small business around here that has a web page that I can pull up quickly?
Paradigm.
Paradigm. Paradigm. Okay. So if we look at their site, okay, this is one that's called parallax, which means that all the pages keep loading as you scroll down, or if you were to start at the top and say, I want to go to the menu, it's going to basically jump us way down to that spot. So if you went to print this one, it would print way too many pages. If you're going to print this one, I would say start at the top and have it just print 1 or 2 pages in the range, and then have it print the last page in the range so that you see the footer. But this is where you could mark up, come on, cursor, I'll go back to home. This is considered the header, but inside of it they also have the navigation. That's nested inside of there. This is probably their like site ID or their branding, or you could call it whatever you want. That's a div. Then they start having individual pages. Anybody else think of another one? I'd like to find one that's not a parallax. A website that you go to or know of. This is a guess. Okay, this one doesn't go on too terribly long. So again, they have their site ID with the menu inside of, or the navigation inside of it. They have a couple of content. This is body content 1, body content 2, body content 3, body content 4, and then they get down to the footer. And this is going to be the same on every single page. So find a site that you like. If you're able to print out the whole first page, as it were, and it's 1 or 2 pages, great. If it's a long one, print the first 1 or 2 and the last one so you see the footer. And then I'm going to go get some markers so you can put boxes around. So if you want to look up at the screen real quick, this is Etsy, and I ridiculously zoomed out. This is probably what it looks like normally, or no, here's 100%. But I zoomed out on it so I could see even more on the page, and I can show you that at this view, I can see this part up here would be considered the header, and there's some navigation in here. All of this is body content, but inside of it, there's probably another div of featured products or something like that. This is part of the body, but this would be another div of what are we, might be the name of it, or info, whatever you want to call it. Featured products 2, and then eventually you get down here to the footer. So this part would be, the box around it would be the div of the footer. So there's kind of some main chunks. Those main pieces, header, footer, body content, nav, for sure, and then look for sub-chunks within them.